Human explorer saves alien girl from a monster and receives a reward that changes them both forever. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The wind howled through the dense forest as Commander Chris Williams trudged through the thick underbrush, his heart racing. His boots sunk into the soft, muddy earth with each step, his mind focused on the mission. As a seasoned explorer, Chris had seen his share of strange and dangerous places, but nothing quite like this planet. The air smelled of wet moss, and the heavy humidity pressed down on him like a blanket. His suit, designed for extreme environments, clung to his body as he adjusted the straps of his backpack. He checked his scanner again. Nothing. Just dense jungle and the eerie silence that had settled over the landscape. It was supposed to be a routine survey mission, but something felt off. A sudden noise broke the stillness, a low growl coming from deeper within the woods. Chris instinctively reached for his sidearm, the familiar weight of the weapon a small comfort in the tense moment. He cautiously moved toward the source of the sound, his senses heightened. The trees around him rustled, and there, in the distance, he saw movement. His heart skipped a beat. A strange figure emerged from the shadows, a girl, or what seemed like a girl, though unlike anything he had ever seen. Her skin was a striking shade of blue, and her long silver hair shimmered in the dappled sunlight that filtered through the canopy above. Her eyes were large and filled with fear, her body trembling as she backed away from something lurking behind her. Chris's breath caught in his throat. Without thinking, he rushed toward her, his every step driven by a sense of urgency. As he approached, the creature emerged from the shadows, its massive form towering over the girl. It was a hideous beast, with long, jagged claws and fangs that gleamed in the dim light. The girl screamed, a sound that echoed through the forest, and the monster lunged at her. In a split second, Chris reacted. He raised his weapon and fired, the blast striking the creature in its chest. It howled in pain, stumbling back before charging again. Chris didn't hesitate. He fired again, this time hitting the creature square in the head. The beast collapsed with a deafening thud. The forest fell silent once more. Chris approached the girl, his heart pounding in his chest. He could see the fear in her eyes, but there was also something else, something that made him hesitate for a brief moment. She was alive, and that was all that mattered. He knelt down in front of her, offering his hand. She hesitated, but after a moment, she took it, her fingers trembling. "Are you hurt?" Chris asked softly, his voice calm but urgent. She shook her head, her silver hair catching the light as she did. I'm okay. Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaky. Chris nodded, relief flooding through him. "It's all right now. You're safe." The girl looked at him, her expression filled with gratitude. "You saved me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how I can repay you." Chris smiled gently, helping her to her feet. "You don't owe me anything. Just be safe." She looked at him for a moment longer, her eyes searching his face, before speaking again. "You are different from the others. Most humans would have left me to die." Chris frowned, unsure of how to respond to that. Not all humans are the same. She seemed to consider his words before nodding slowly. "My name is Aliana," she said, offering him a small, shaky smile. "Thank you for saving me, Chris Williams." Chris nodded, still processing the situation. He hadn't expected this planet to be home to such strange, intelligent life. He had assumed it was uninhabited, just another wild world to explore. But this girl, this alien, had just proven him wrong. And something about her was pulling him in, something he couldn't quite explain. "It's my job," he said, brushing off the weight of the moment. "But I'm glad I could help." Aliana smiled more brightly now, though it was still tinged with uncertainty. "I may not be able to repay you now," she said, her voice steadying, "but I promise. You will be rewarded. There are things I can offer you, things that could change both of our lives." Chris raised an eyebrow. He wasn't in this for rewards, but the intensity in her eyes made him pause. "What kind of reward?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. Aliana took a deep breath, her gaze never leaving his. "You'll see soon enough. But for now, rest. There's much more to this world than you know. Chris stood motionless for a moment, still processing the intensity of the encounter. The forest around him seemed to hold its breath, as if the trees themselves were waiting for something to unfold. Aliana, still holding his hand, looked up at him with a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. The strange connection between them lingered, an unspoken understanding that neither of them could fully grasp. "Where are we going?" Chris asked, breaking the silence. Aliana hesitated for a moment before answering. "There's a place not far from here," she said softly. "It's safe. I can take you there." Chris nodded, though a part of him still felt the weight of the mission he had been sent on. This wasn't part of the plan. He wasn't supposed to get involved with anyone, especially not an alien. Yet something about Aliana's presence was magnetic, drawing him in despite the chaos. As they walked through the dense jungle, Aliana's pace was slow, her steps careful, as if she were still recovering from the shock. Chris kept an eye on their surroundings, his senses alert for any sign of danger. The path ahead was shrouded in mist, and the silence between them was filled only by the distant sound of birds calling from the treetops. "You said you could repay me," Chris finally said, breaking the quiet. "How?" Aliana glanced at him, her violet eyes glowing in the dim light. "I'm not like other aliens you've encountered," she said, her voice tinged with a quiet sadness. "I come from a long line of rulers, but my people, they've forgotten what it means to be kind." Chris was about to ask more when a low rumble echoed through the air, vibrating the ground beneath their feet. He froze, his hand instinctively going to the weapon at his side. "What was that?" he asked. Aliana looked worried but didn't answer right away. Instead, she quickened her pace. "We need to hurry," she said. "Urgently. The creatures here, they're drawn to sound. We can't stay out in the open." Chris's heart rate quickened as they moved faster through the trees, their surroundings becoming more claustrophobic with each passing moment. The air grew thicker, and the ground seemed to shift beneath his boots. Aliana led him to a small clearing, hidden from view by thick vines and overgrown foliage. She motioned for him to crouch down. "We'll wait here until it passes," she whispered. Chris nodded, his breathing steady but his mind racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. He glanced over at Aliana, who had her eyes closed, her body tense as she listened for any signs of danger. Her earlier words echoed in his mind. "I'm not like other aliens you've encountered." He didn't know why, but he believed her. He had been trained to analyze situations, to understand people, and everything about Aliana told him she was telling the truth. As they crouched in the clearing, the world seemed to hold its breath. The rumbling sound had faded, but the tension remained. Aliana turned to him, her gaze intense. "I told you I would repay you," she said again, her voice softer this time. "But what I have to offer is something far more than you can imagine. I can show you things about this planet, and about yourself, that will change everything." Chris's curiosity piqued, but before he could ask more, Aliana reached into a pouch at her side and pulled out a small glowing crystal. It shimmered in the dim light, casting a soft, ethereal glow. She held it out to him. "This," she said, "is a gift. It holds the power to change fate. It's not just a token, it's a piece of my world, and it's now connected to you." Chris hesitated for a moment, then took the crystal from her hand. As soon as his fingers touched it, a warmth spread through his body, as if the crystal was alive. He could feel something stirring within him, something he couldn't explain. "What does it do?" he asked, his voice a whisper. Aliana smiled, but there was something bittersweet in her expression. "It will reveal your true potential," she said quietly. "It will show you what you are truly capable of. But be warned, this gift is not without its price." Chris's grip on the crystal tightened as he stared at Aliana, the weight of her words sinking in. He had no idea what kind of journey he was about to embark on, but one thing was certain, his life would never be the same again. And it seemed that Aliana was right. Something had changed between them in this moment, something neither of them could deny. The crystal, glowing softly in his hand, was just the beginning. He could feel it, and whatever came next, he would face it with Aliana by his side. Chris stood there, still holding the glowing crystal, its warmth radiating through his fingers. The jungle around them seemed to fade into the background, the rustling leaves and distant calls of wildlife becoming distant echoes. All that mattered now was Aliana, standing in front of him, her expression serious, yet filled with a strange mixture of hope and apprehension. "What do I do with it?" Chris asked, his voice low, his eyes never leaving the crystal in his hand. Aliana looked at him with those piercing violet eyes, her gaze steady and unwavering. "It will guide you," she replied softly. "But it will also test you. The power within it is not something that can be controlled easily. It will show you the truth of your own strength." Chris felt a strange stirring deep within him, a sensation that was almost too overwhelming to grasp. The crystal, though small, seemed to pulse with an energy he couldn't quite understand. He could feel it in his bones, vibrating with a power that was both alien and familiar at the same time. "What truth?" Chris asked, his voice thick with confusion. "The truth of who you really are," Aliana said. "What you're capable of, and what you can become. You are more than just a human explorer. You are the key to something far greater than anything you can imagine." Her words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Chris stared at the crystal, his mind racing. He had always considered himself an ordinary man, someone who did his job and followed orders. But now, with Aliana's words echoing in his mind, he wasn't so sure. Was he truly just a human? Or was there something more to him, something that this crystal would unlock? The weight of the moment was almost unbearable, but before he could say anything, Aliana stepped closer, her hand resting gently on his arm. "We need to go," she said, her voice urgent. "The others will be looking for us soon." Chris nodded, shaking off the uncertainty that had settled over him. He had to focus. He had to keep moving. He followed Aliana as she led him deeper into the jungle, her movements graceful and fluid despite the heavy burden she carried. The path they took was narrow, the jungle dense and thick with vines that seemed to cling to every step. But Aliana moved with a quiet determination, and Chris did his best to keep up. As they moved further, the air grew heavier, more oppressive, and Chris began to feel the weight of the crystal in his hand more acutely. It was as if it was calling to him, urging him forward. After what felt like hours, they arrived at a small clearing, a quiet oasis in the middle of the jungle. In the center stood a structure unlike anything Chris had ever seen, an ancient, towering monument, its stone surface covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shift and change with the light. Aliana approached the monument, her steps slow and deliberate. She turned to Chris, her eyes filled with something Chris couldn't quite place. "This is where it begins," she said softly. "This is the place where you will truly understand what you are capable of." Chris's heart pounded in his chest as he stepped forward, feeling a sense of awe wash over him. This was no ordinary monument. There was something ancient and powerful about it, something that connected him to it in ways he couldn't explain. He could feel the crystal in his hand pulsing in time with the monument's energy, as if they were both part of the same force. Aliana stepped aside, allowing him to approach the monument. She looked at him one last time before speaking. "The crystal will unlock the path forward. But remember, this is only the beginning. What happens next will shape your destiny. You must be ready." Chris took a deep breath, his mind focused. He was ready. He had no idea what awaited him, but he knew he couldn't turn back now. He placed the crystal against the stone surface of the monument, and the world around him seemed to shift. The ground trembled beneath his feet, and the air crackled with energy. A blinding light erupted from the monument, enveloping him in its brilliance. For a moment, he thought he might be blinded, but then the light faded, leaving him standing in a place unlike anything he had ever seen. The jungle was gone, replaced by an endless expanse of stars, a vast, cosmic ocean stretching out before him. The air was different here, charged with a power he had never experienced. And standing before him, as if waiting for him, was a figure, tall and regal, their presence commanding yet peaceful. "Welcome," the figure said, their voice echoing through the space. Chris's heart raced as he realized that this was no dream. This was real. He had crossed into a new world, one that held secrets he had yet to understand. And somehow, he knew that his journey had only just begun. Chris stood still, the cosmic expanse stretching out before him. The figure before him, tall and regal, seemed to be made of pure light, their forms shimmering with an ethereal glow. Despite their otherworldly appearance, there was something familiar about them, a quiet presence that was both comforting and daunting. The figure spoke again, their voice echoing in Chris's mind, as though it resonated from the very stars themselves. "You have crossed into the space between worlds, Commander Chris Williams," the figure said, their tone calm and steady. "This is where your journey begins, where your true path will unfold." Chris swallowed hard, the enormity of the situation hitting him all at once. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The figure raised a hand, and the space around them seemed to ripple like water disturbed by a stone. "You are in the Nexus, the place where the threads of all possible futures converge. Here, choices are made, and destinies are shaped." Chris took a cautious step forward, the weight of the words sinking in. "But why am I here?" he asked, his mind racing. The figure regarded him with eyes that seemed to contain the entire universe. "You are here because you have been chosen," they said simply. "The crystal you carry is the key to unlocking your potential. It has linked you to this place, and now, you must decide how you will wield its power." Chris looked down at the crystal in his hand, its glow steady and warm. It felt alive, as though it was waiting for something, waiting for him to take the next step. "How do I use it?" he asked, his voice uncertain. The figure's gaze softened, and they nodded slowly. "The crystal will guide you, but you must first understand its true nature. It is not just an object of power. It is a reflection of who you are and what you are capable of. To wield it, you must embrace your true self, the self you have yet to fully discover." Chris's mind swirled with questions, but before he could speak, the figure gestured toward the endless expanse of stars before them. "Look," they said. "See the paths that stretch out before you. Each one is a possibility, a future waiting to be realized." Chris's gaze followed the figure's hand, and as he looked closer, he saw it. A glowing web of interconnected threads, each one shimmering with potential. Some threads were bright and steady, others flickered with uncertainty. "These are the choices you will face," the figure explained. "Every decision, every action, will alter the course of your journey. The crystal will show you the way, but it is up to you to decide which path to take." Chris's heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the web of possibilities. He had always been a man of action, someone who made decisions quickly and with confidence. But now, with the weight of this new reality pressing down on him, he felt a deep sense of uncertainty. "What if I make the wrong choice?" he asked, the question slipping from his lips before he could stop it. The figure smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "There is no wrong choice," they said. "There are only paths yet to be walked. You will learn, you will grow, and you will find the strength within you to face whatever comes." Chris felt a wave of reassurance wash over him, but it was quickly replaced by a new sense of determination. He had always believed in himself, in his ability to rise to any challenge. But this was different. This was something far greater than anything he had ever faced before. He was no longer just a human explorer on a distant planet. He was part of something much bigger, something that spanned across the stars and through time itself. "I'm ready," he said, his voice firm with conviction. The figure nodded, their expression approving. "Then go forth, Commander. The universe is waiting for you." With those final words, the figure stepped aside, and the space around Chris began to shift. The stars before him seemed to bend and twist, creating a new path, a path that would lead him to his destiny. As the cosmic landscape faded and the world around him transformed, Chris felt the crystal's warmth grow stronger, its power surging within him. This was just the beginning, and he was ready to face whatever came next. With a final breath, he stepped forward, the future unfolding before him like a vast, uncharted frontier. The air around Chris seemed to hum with energy as the landscape shifted before him. He stood at the edge of an unfamiliar world, the stars above swirling in patterns he could not begin to comprehend. The ground beneath his feet felt solid, yet there was a strange lightness in the atmosphere, as though gravity itself were playing by different rules. His heart raced with excitement and fear as he looked around. Everything felt both alien and familiar, as if he had always belonged here, even though he knew he hadn't. The crystal in his hand pulsed with a soft glow, as if it were alive, guiding him towards something he couldn't yet see. Aliana, standing beside him, seemed unbothered by the surreal landscape. Her expression was calm, her violet eyes glowing with an inner knowledge that Chris couldn't quite grasp. "This is the Nexus," she explained, her voice low, but carrying a weight that seemed to echo in the vastness around them. It exists between worlds, between realities. It is the place where everything converges. Chris nodded slowly, trying to make sense of her words. So, this is where I'm supposed to find myself, he asked, his voice filled with both doubt and hope. Aliana turned toward him, her gaze steady and unwavering. Yes, she said softly. This place holds the answers you seek, but only you can choose how to find them. Chris's thoughts swirled as he tried to process everything that had happened since he first arrived on this strange planet. He had gone from a simple explorer, searching the stars, to something much more. His hands tightened around the crystal as a surge of determination filled him. The weight of his new role, whatever it might be, settled over him, and he knew there was no turning back now. So, where do I go from here? Chris asked, his voice steady despite the uncertainty gnawing at him. Aliana didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped forward, her eyes scanning the horizon as though searching for something only she could see. The first step, she said finally, is to understand the power within you. The crystal is a key, yes, but it is also a mirror. It will show you your deepest fears, your greatest strengths. It will test you. Chris's heart thudded in his chest. He wasn't sure if he was ready for that, but there was no going back. He had to face whatever came next. The crystal in his hand pulsed again, this time sending a warm wave of energy through him. He looked at Aliana, his eyes filled with questions. What if I fail? Aliana turned back to him, her eyes softening. You won't fail, she said, her voice filled with quiet confidence. Failure isn't the end. It's just another part of the journey. The real question is, how will you move forward? Chris absorbed her words, trying to steady his breathing. His gaze drifted once more to the shimmering expanse of stars and shifting landscapes around them. This place, the Nexus, felt like it was alive, constantly changing and evolving. It wasn't just a destination, it was the beginning of something far greater. Aliana's voice brought him back to the present. The path you take will not be easy. But remember, you are not alone. The crystal, the choices you make, and the people you meet, they will all shape who you become. Chris felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. He wasn't sure what kind of man he would become, or where this journey would lead him. But as he looked at Aliana, he knew one thing for certain. He was ready to take the first step. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, the crystal glowing brightly in his hand, illuminating the path ahead. The journey had just begun, and he was determined to face whatever came next. The stars stretched out before him, an endless sea of possibilities, each one a path to a future he could only begin to imagine. Chris felt the pull of the unknown as he stepped deeper into the Nexus. The landscape shifted before him once again, but this time there was a new sense of purpose in his movements. The air around him crackled with energy, the atmosphere thick with possibilities. He could sense the crystal growing warmer in his hand, as if it were becoming attuned to his thoughts. Aliana walked beside him, her pace steady, her presence a calming force amidst the chaos of this strange world. Her violet eyes remained focused, as if she had already walked this path 1,000 times before. Where are we going now? Chris asked, his voice filled with anticipation. The journey is not about where we go, Aliana replied, her voice carrying a quiet wisdom. It is about understanding what we must become in order to move forward. Chris nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what she meant. He had always been a man of action, a man who prided himself on being able to chart a course and see it through. But this was different. This wasn't about simply following a path. It was about becoming something more, something greater. How do I know when I'm ready? He asked, the question lingering in the air between them. Aliana turned to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of understanding and something else, something almost like pity. You will know, she said simply. You will feel it when the time comes. Chris wasn't sure he understood, but he didn't press her further. Instead, he focused on the path ahead, his mind swirling with possibilities. The Nexus, this place between worlds, was a place of infinite potential, but also infinite uncertainty. Every step he took seemed to bring him closer to something he couldn't quite grasp. The ground beneath his feet began to shift again, and Chris glanced down, noticing the subtle change in texture. It was as though the very earth was alive, responding to his presence. Aliana glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "This is the heart of the Nexus," she said. "The place where all paths converge. You are standing on the threshold of your true self." Chris stopped in his tracks, the weight of her words sinking in. The heart of the Nexus. The place where all paths converged. He had no idea what that meant, but he could feel something deep within him stirring, a sense of purpose that had been buried beneath years of training and exploration. "What do I do now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Aliana smiled, though there was no humor in it, only quiet understanding. "Now you wait. The Nexus will show you the way." As if on cue, the ground beneath Chris's feet began to glow with a soft, golden light. The stars above them flickered, their light intensifying until the entire sky seemed to pulse with energy. Chris felt a strange warmth spreading through him, radiating from the crystal still held tightly in his hand. The warmth grew stronger, and for a moment, Chris thought he might be consumed by it. But instead of fear, he felt something else, a sense of calm. A feeling of peace that washed over him like a wave, filling him with a quiet certainty. He knew, without a doubt, that this was where he was meant to be. This was the moment that would define him. "It's time," Aliana said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Chris looked at her, his eyes steady. "What happens next?" Aliana's smile softened, and for the first time, there was something almost hopeful in her gaze. "You will find your true path, Commander," she said, and with it, the strength to change the future. Chris nodded, the weight of her words settling in his chest. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time since arriving on this strange world, he felt ready. Ready to face whatever came next. The golden light around him intensified, and the stars above seemed to converge in a brilliant explosion of light. For a moment, everything went white, and then, nothing. Chris blinked, his mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. He looked around, but the Nexus had vanished. In its place was a vast, empty void, stretching out in all directions. The only sound was his own breath, steady and calm. He looked down at the crystal in his hand, now glowing brighter than ever. "What now?" he asked aloud, his voice echoing through the emptiness. And as if in response, the crystal pulsed with a burst of energy, sending a wave of light racing out in all directions. Chris watched, mesmerized, as the light filled the void, creating shapes, forming paths. And then, in the distance, he saw it. A figure he knew. Aliana. She was standing at the far end of the path, waiting for him. "Come," she called softly, her voice reaching him across the distance. "It is time to begin." Chris felt a surge of determination fill him. He didn't know what awaited him, but he knew he had to follow. He had to take that first step. And so, with the crystal glowing brightly in his hand, he stepped forward, toward the figure that awaited him, toward the unknown future that was now his to shape. Chris stepped forward, the light from the crystal guiding his path. The vast void around him seemed to dissolve as the energy from the crystal connected with the fabric of the universe itself, forming paths that stretched infinitely. He had no idea where this journey would lead, but one thing was certain. He was no longer the same person who had entered the Nexus. Aliana's presence in the distance was like a beacon, her figure standing tall and steady at the far end of the light-filled path. Chris walked toward her, each step feeling like a deeper connection to something greater, something that he had always felt but never understood until now. The void around him was no longer empty. It had transformed into a living, breathing landscape. As he moved closer, the ground beneath his feet shifted, forming intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with energy. He could feel the crystal vibrating with each step, its power growing stronger, as if it were syncing with his own heartbeat. When he finally reached Aliana, she looked at him with those deep, violet eyes, her gaze filled with knowing. "You've come far," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight of meaning. "But the real journey is just beginning." Chris nodded, trying to find the words that matched the overwhelming sense of change he was experiencing. "What happens now?" he asked. Aliana stepped aside, motioning for him to look ahead. "You've crossed into a realm where your choices shape reality. The power within you is awakening, but it is still up to you to decide how you will use it." Chris stared ahead, the endless expanse of possibilities stretching before him. Each path was lined with vibrant colors, each one a potential future, a different path to follow. I feel different, Chris admitted, his voice tinged with awe. Like everything I knew has changed. Aliana smiled, her expression soft but firm. That's the first step, she said. The crystal has unlocked your true potential, but now, you must learn to master it. You must choose your path and understand the consequences of each decision you make. Chris's mind raced as he looked at the paths before him. Each one seemed to offer something different. Some were bright, others darker, but all felt real. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had always prided himself on making decisions, but this was different. How do I choose? He asked, feeling a surge of doubt. It's not about picking the right path, Aliana explained. It's about understanding yourself and what you are capable of. Each choice will lead you to new experiences, new growth. The key is to trust in yourself and the power you now possess. Chris looked back at her, the uncertainty in his chest slowly ebbing away. He had been an explorer, a seeker of answers. But now, he realized that the answers weren't just out there in the universe, they were within him. He had the power to shape his own destiny, to walk a path that was uniquely his. I'm ready, he said, his voice firm. Aliana nodded, her gaze full of approval. Then step forward and let your journey unfold. As Chris took his first step onto one of the glowing paths, he felt a sense of purpose fill him. The light from the crystal intensified, and for the first time, he felt completely connected to the universe around him. This was no longer just about survival or exploration. This was about transformation, about embracing the unknown and discovering what he was truly capable of. The paths before him were not just future possibilities. They were the map of his own soul, waiting to be charted. With a final glance at Aliana, who watched him with a proud smile, Chris walked forward into the light, knowing that whatever came next, he would face it with newfound strength and purpose. The universe had opened before him, and he was ready to embrace it, one step at a time. Chris stepped forward, his heart racing with anticipation as the crystal pulsed with energy in his hand. The path ahead shimmered in the vibrant light, and each step felt like a deeper connection to the universe itself. The weight of the journey, the magnitude of what he was about to face, pressed down on him, but with it came a sense of clarity he had never experienced before. The landscape around him seemed to respond to his every move, like a living entity, its colors shifting and morphing as if the very world itself was alive. He could feel the power coursing through him, the power that the crystal had unlocked within him. It was a hum, a vibration that resonated deep in his chest. He glanced back at Aliana, her form a beacon of calm in the distance. She stood there, watching him, her eyes filled with both pride and expectation. Keep moving forward, she called to him, her voice soft but firm. The path will not always be clear, but trust in yourself. You are capable of more than you know. Chris nodded, his eyes returning to the path ahead. The light from the crystal illuminated the way, and though the journey felt uncertain, there was an undeniable pull guiding him forward. As he walked, the landscape shifted again, this time revealing a series of stone pillars rising from the ground. Each pillar was different, some cracked and weathered, others smooth and unscathed. The pillars seemed to stretch up into the sky, disappearing into a cloudless horizon. Chris approached one of the pillars, his hand instinctively reaching out to touch it. The moment his fingers made contact with the stone, a ripple of energy coursed through him, and a vision flashed before his eyes. He saw himself, standing at the edge of a great chasm, the winds howling around him as he faced a choice. One path led across a narrow bridge, the other through a dark and twisted forest. Both paths held danger, but only one would lead to the answers he sought. The vision disappeared as quickly as it had come, leaving Chris standing in front of the pillar, his heart pounding. He pulled his hand back, his mind racing. What was that? He whispered to himself. Aliana's voice broke through his thoughts. That is the first trial, she said, her voice calm and knowing. The path you choose will shape your journey, but it will not be easy. Every choice comes with consequences, and you must trust your instincts. Chris stood there for a moment, contemplating the vision. He had faced choices before, but never like this. This was different. This was more than just a decision. It was the key to unlocking the future. He looked at the two paths ahead of him, the bridge and the forest. The bridge seemed safe, the path clear, but something about the forest called to him. It was a place of uncertainty, a place where he might find answers, or lose himself entirely. His hand tightened around the crystal, its warmth growing stronger with his resolve. Chris took a deep breath and made his decision. He stepped toward the forest. As he entered, the air grew cooler, the shadows thickening around him. The trees were tall and ancient, their branches twisting above him like the fingers of forgotten gods. Every step he took felt like a deeper plunge into the unknown, but with each step, he felt more certain that this was the path he was meant to take. The crystal in his hand began to glow brighter, its light cutting through the darkness around him. The forest seemed to respond to its light, the trees shifting and parting as if guiding him forward. Time seemed to lose its meaning as he walked, the forest stretching on endlessly. The further he went, the more the feeling of purpose grew within him. He was no longer just an explorer on a distant planet. He was part of something much greater, a journey that transcended the physical world and entered the realm of destiny itself. And as he moved deeper into the forest, he knew that whatever awaited him, he was ready. The crystal was more than just a tool, it was a guide, and he was finally beginning to understand the power it held. With each step, he was not just moving through the forest, he was moving through his own transformation. Aliana's voice echoed through his mind, a soft reminder of the path ahead. "Trust yourself," she had said. "You are more than you know." And with that, Chris continued forward, the forest opening before him, the path ahead clear at last. Chris continued through the forest, his steps sure and steady, guided by the soft light emanating from the crystal in his hand. The air around him seemed to hum with an energy that he could feel deep within his chest, as though the very forest itself was alive, breathing alongside him. The shadows of the trees stretched long across the ground, their dark forms moving with the gentle sway of the wind, but the path ahead remained illuminated by the crystal's glow. It felt as though the forest was acknowledging his presence, guiding him forward without ever speaking a word. With each step, the uncertainty that had once filled him began to fade. He had made his choice, and now he had to trust that it would lead him where he needed to go. The silence around him was profound, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves or the distant call of an unseen creature. It was in this quiet that Chris felt a strange sense of peace, as though the world around him was offering its support, encouraging him to press on. After what felt like hours, Chris reached the heart of the forest, where the trees parted to reveal a vast clearing. In the center stood a massive stone archway, its surface carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shimmer in the light. The arch was unlike anything Chris had ever seen. It felt ancient, yet alive, as though it held the secrets of countless generations. As he approached the arch, the crystal in his hand began to glow brighter, its light intensifying as he drew closer. The archway seemed to pulse in response, as though the crystal and the ancient stone were in perfect harmony. Chris paused before the arch, his mind racing with questions. What was this place? What was waiting for him on the other side? He had no answers, but deep down, he felt that crossing through this arch would be the final step in his transformation. Without hesitation, Chris stepped forward. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the world around him seemed to shift. The forest faded away, replaced by a vast expanse of light and energy, swirling and shifting like a living nebula. Chris stood in the center of the cosmic expanse, the crystal in his hand glowing brighter than ever. The light was overwhelming, yet it felt familiar, as if it was calling him home. "You have made it," a voice said, soft and ethereal, yet it resonated within Chris's very being. He turned to find the source of the voice, but there was no one in sight. The voice seemed to come from everywhere, surrounding him, filling the space. "You have chosen your path, and now you must understand the power within you." Chris held the crystal tightly, feeling its warmth surge through his body. He had crossed the threshold, and now it was time to face whatever came next. "What do I need to understand?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The voice responded, its tone both gentle and commanding. "You must understand that the power within you is not just for yourself. It is a force that connects all things, that binds the universe together. You are part of something much greater than you have ever realized." Chris stood in awe as the light around him shifted, revealing visions of distant stars, swirling galaxies, and unknown worlds. It was as though the universe itself was unfolding before him, showing him the interconnectedness of all things. The crystal in his hand pulsed with energy, resonating with the vastness of the cosmos. You are a part of this, the voice continued. But you must choose how you will use your power. Will you use it for yourself, or will you use it to shape the future, to guide others? Chris felt the weight of the choice pressing down on him. This was not just about him. It was about everything. He had been given the power to change the future, to influence the course of the universe itself. But how would he choose to wield that power? I will choose to help, Chris said, his voice firm with resolve. I will use my power to guide others, to make the universe a better place. The voice responded with a soft, approving hum. Your journey is not yet complete, it said. But you have taken the first step. Now, you must go forth and fulfill your purpose. The light around him began to fade, and the cosmic expanse slowly dissolved, leaving Chris standing alone once again. But he was no longer the same man who had entered the forest. He had been transformed, his purpose clear in his mind and heart. He looked down at the crystal in his hand, its glow now steady and calm, as if it had accepted his decision. He was ready. With a final glance at the place where the voice had spoken to him, Chris turned and began walking forward, knowing that the future was his to shape, and he would face whatever came next with courage and determination.